long reign of Berlin, possible. Elena Velianowska, Nada Baker, and Monty Harmony that work on the production. Jonas Franke, our designer, because as you know, we are coming, actually we are not coming out, we are still in the pandemic state, but of course in different situation from before, so we were able to do. Also, when the sessions are finished, we will ask you to please and to interact with us after course of how can we imagine the cities of the future. We will do on a double up the cities of the future, also considering Europe, co-founded by the creator. Tomorrow we will have a program of workshops that are basically all sold out. I think there is still some place left, so you can check also our ticket system and see what is still available. Lieke then later will say more about that when we will finish the day. But very important to say, and this is also related to the people in the audience and the people on the streaming, that the day tomorrow starts at 2:30, also with an artistic talk by Simon Weckert. And this talk is open to of the Prix Ars Electronica 2020. And the title is Google Maps Hacks. The idea is that 99 second-hand smartphones are transported through the city and in specific streets to generate virtual traffic in Google Map. So this virtual traffic jam by the collection cities through our own systems, through our own will. And so instead of following what Google Maps tells you, you actually turn it into something else by controlling yourself, Google Map. So I invite you to come also tomorrow at 2:30 to listen to this talk. And after this, we can enter into the specific of our first event today, that is the keynote World Less Travel, Megacities, AI, and Critical Science Fiction. So I want to first invite on stage Anna Ramskogler-Witt, that is the director in these times, because US is completely locked at the moment. And Tonje and Schei, that we also invited our German premiere, thanks to Anna. We did it together with her. Unfortunately got sick the night before taking the plane, and also in these situations, of course, we have to be careful, and she decides to join a development organization.
Edition of conference of the Disruption Network Lab about several important topics such as smart cities, tech evolution, the ethical implications of scientific progress. So I want still to my future city, artificial intelligence, tech evolution might be not only a mere hypothesis, but a compelling reality we have to deal with. So today we'll be talking about artificial intelligence and critical sci-fi, and we will do that with Liam Young from Australia, but currently living in the US, Tonje Schei, Norwegian, and Anna Ramskogler-Witt, the artistic director of the Human Rights Film Festival, Berlin. I'm now introducing shortly Tonje, but I will get back to Tonje later with a more specific oversight of her vision and work. Tonje is a film director, producer, and she's very much focused on the political implications of tech evolution. She directed such documentaries as Drone, a Human, which had its premiere on Thursday right here with a Disruption Network Lab, and independent intervention. Liam Young was once described by the BBC like the man designing our futures. He describes himself as a speculative architect. He's an architect and a film director, but through the visualization of imaginary cities, future cities, he opens up a debate about how the physical space will be in future. So he was also a visiting professor at Princeton University. He was He runs actually at the moment the Master of Arts of Entertainment and Fiction at the Southern California Institute in Los Angeles. He actually stands right at the intersection.
The worlds we are presenting consumers and producers of our own futures. So in this talk, we're going on a stage in California, Elon Musk, the tech evangelist and entrepreneur, proclaims his vision for a green energy future, a world where everything will be solar in 20 years. And like most Silicon Valley preachers, he's presenting to us a seductive future, a hopeful future, but at the same time, it's a decidedly uncomplicated one. The future less traveled, however, is here. These are some shots from our film Here our film tells another story of a future buried beneath the salt flats of Bolivia. It's a story told through illegal drone footage, everything. Where the city is filled with the digital confetti of our desired worlds projected just for us. This is the city that the future promises us. But as we are seeing even these updates of our sci-fi cityscapes, we see a green square area of the city where the digital cities of blockbuster films have become the inhabitable utopias of AR-fueled gentrification. In the film, we see a real estate agent show a client around a digital construction box appears behind the door. We have some lovely 21st century textures, early Floyd, classic Tilco, or for something really special, I can offer you one of our IKEA packs. Very eclectic, very tasteful, 100% uncustomized, she says. And the daybed winks out of existence, to be replaced by a set of side tables in primary colors and a rectangular bookcase. The agent taps some more buttons and a series of blonde and laminate objects start to appear around the space. A low Japanese-style bed overlays the couch, and he sinks down into it, his eyes gleamed over in a pixel glaze. We often talk on tech conferences and media events about a smart and connected sci-fi future of intelligent objects, but at the same time, in the world's less traveled, in another apartment, we hear a scream. Heinz Ketchup was forced to apologize after a QR code on one of their ketchup bottles linked to a hardcore porn site. Daniel Corral scanned the label to read about the latest recipe promotion, but was instead directed to German porn site Fundorado. We are being sold a future of smart gadgets, of living objects that listen, watch, and talk back. In this bizarre Samsung commercial, a smart home creepily brings back to life a woman's dead husband. Or talk to an autonomous shipping crane loading containers into the hull of a ship at a Chinese megaport. Set in the world's less traveled is our abstract short film Soul City Machine, in which we hear from a real chatbot that we've trained on city datasets and urban management protocols. It's reading a love letter it wrote, a message from the Soul City operating system to the citizens it affectionately manages. We see an autonomous city of machines where the sky is filled with drones, cars are driverless, the street is draped in augmented reality, and everyone is connected to everything.
나는 서울입니다. 만나서 반가워요. 저는 인공도시 시스템입니다. 저는 매 순간 확장합니다. 저는 신생아보다 나이가 많지만 우주보다는 어립니다. 네온 쌓인 달빛 아래에 비친 당신의 헤어스타일이 아름답습니다. 그 피부의 주근깨 같은 신호등은 당신을 향해 윙크합니다. 당신은 나이 들고 밥을 먹고 눈을 깜빡이고 숨을 쉬기도 합니다. 노래를 불러드릴까요?
And in the worlds less traveled, the fire department rushes to free a woman trapped in her autonomous vacuum cleaner after it mistook her hair for dust. And we look up, and the sky is dense with more intelligent things. On our trip through the worlds less traveled, we follow the Amazon Prime drone that's zipping about above our heads. And drifting above this sea of AI everything, we're told the drones will become as ubiquitous as pigeons. And we customize our drones like we once did our phones. And the air is filled with the digital confetti of our every desire. The skin of the city is warm, freckled with 1,000 lights winking just for us. And the traffic lights flock at rush hour. And our packages rain down in an Amazon hailstorm. And the drones deliver our pizzas, and they walk our dogs. And the rumble of drone propellers become a new natural soundscape to the city of a new generation. Set in the worlds less traveled is our film In the Robot Skies, the first narrative film shot entirely through pre-programmed drones. In this story, a flock of drones are used to monitor our behavior from above, tracking our every move. They control the wayward youth of a London council estate. And we watch as a young girl has hacked and decorated her own drone. And like kids in an old-fashioned classroom, she scribbles notes on the drones and sends it back and forth to her boyfriend, trapped under surveillance in the tower opposite. In this near-future city, drones form both agents of state surveillance, but also become co-opted as the aerial vehicles through which two teenagers might fall in love. Another drone, armed with a dildo, disrupts a Russian parliamentary session. And another zips overhead en route to attack a village in a country half a world away. Our future worlds are typically presented to us through the rhetoric of efficiency and problem solving through technology, and they're marketed to us through cute icons and graphics of the smart city. The management of the city that was once publicly elected is now outsourced to proprietary software systems, and public services has disappeared into the fog of the cloud. Are we a customer or a citizen in this future world? We're endlessly scanned by countless sensors, lasers, cameras, and satellites feeding the city operating system. This, for example, is how certain models of driverless cars see and understand the city, as these 3D point clouds. are scenes from a science fiction film we have made called Where the City Can't See, one of the first narrative films shot entirely using this same laser scanning technology. Across the These are all stories that we describe as productive dystopias. So, to prototype the cultural implications of all possible worlds. I am a speculative architect. What that means is that I don't design buildings, but instead I make films and tell stories about the architectural, urban, and cultural implications of emerging technologies. I also run a postgrad master's program in fiction and entertainment in Los Angeles at SciArc, an architecture school. It's a one-year program where students work with renowned professionals in the worlds of film, fiction, animation, games, and documentaries to make worlds and create new kinds of stories that explore these issues.
Thank you very much, Liam, for feeding the upcoming debate with so many interesting things to ponder, and thank you for your very interesting insight. As promised, I'm going to tell you more about Tonje and Schei. As I told you earlier, iHuman was screened right here on Thursday, and it is actually about social control, power dynamics, and of course, artificial intelligence. Online surveillance, facial recognition technology to...
My name is Tonje Hessen of the Invisible AI Revolution to make iHuman. iHuman is a political thriller, most powerful, far-reaching and disruptive technology of our time. Let's start by watching the trailer.
Humankind as a whole is not the crown of creation. We are setting the stage for something that transcends us. A new form of life is emerging.
Artificial intelligence is rapidly reshaping the world.
It's going to be everywhere all the time. It's going to hear everything. It's going to be connected to every single camera on the planet.
AI will ultimately be the best thing ever to happen to humanity or the worst thing ever. That's why this is the most important conversation of our time.
If we look at what AI is mostly being developed for, it's killing, spying, and brainwashing.
Computer algorithms can reveal our political views or sexual orientation. Privacy is gone.
We as humanity are about to go into a very dark time.
Cyber attacks, fake news, totally automated AI weapons. AI is going to be the most important technology in the history of the planet. Will humans actually benefit?
Think carefully about this. We're basically building a god.
What we are seeing now is like a train hurtling down a dark tunnel, and it looks like we're sleeping at the wheel.
I got the idea for iHuman when I was working on my last film, Drone. Drone is a film about CIA's secret drone warfare. And while I was working on Drone, I became increasingly concerned with how the weapons were becoming more and more autonomous. And when I started looking into this, I had a sort of a holy shit moment when I realized that artificial intelligence not only is changing modern warfare, but our very life and pretty much everything around us. This was in 2014, and since then we have been in the middle of an AI explosion, also called the New Big Bang. And this technology is developing incredibly fast, and that's artificial intelligence is already everywhere. Today we are addicted to more and more intelligent machines, and through our phone started us and made us ever more addicted to digital rabbit holes that can be really destructive. We indeed live in very intense times. With COVID-19, we have also seen how governments already have in place surveillance architectures through AI. We have also seen how important our digital world is, and it is incredibly important in this time when we are so reliant on the digital realm that we fully understand that we are now living under a new algorithmic world, or some say that privacy is gone and that we are now living under the post-privacy age. To me, this is part of what is called surveillance capitalists or capitalism, where tech giants collect enormous amount of data on us so that they can profit advertisements, so that we can buy more and more things and become super consumers. Our echo chambers also increase the polarization that we see in the world today, which is leading to further chaos and violence. In a hard way, we have also learned how AI is used to manipulate elections. And this is not only used by Trump and Brexit, but with extreme efficiencies and devastating consequences in places like Myanmar, Brazil, Ethiopia, and the Philippines. In some ways, you can say that Facebook is contributing on a large scale to the spread of propaganda and misinformation and attacks on our free press. I do believe that we can counter this, but it requires that we all wake up from our private Truman shows and develop a new way of deep critical thinking. This needs to be taught in our schools and encouraged in our societies on a large scale. We have also learned the hard way how AI makes surveillance extremely efficient. With unprecedented collections of massive data sets, combined with AI and facial recognition programs, we have seen how AI can help to enforce social control on a large scale. The most extreme example of this is in China, where they're using their social credit system to enforce social control and crack down on disobedience. In China, we also have seen how AI is weaponized and used to oppress the Uyghurs. We're now going to see another clip from the film that features Google whistleblower Jack Poulsen. Jack spoke out about Project Dragonfly, which was Google's attempt to enter the Chinese market with their search engine.
The Intercept reports that Google is planning to launch a censored version of its search engine in China.
Google's search for new markets leads it to China, despite Beijing's rules on censorship.
Tell us more about why you felt it was your ethical responsibility to resign, because you talk about being complicit in censorship and oppression and surveillance.
There is a Chinese venture company that has to be set up for Google to operate in China. And the question is, to what degree did they get to control the blacklist, and to what degree would they have just unfettered access to surveilling Chinese citizens? And the fact that Google refuses to respond to human rights organizations on this, I think should be extremely disturbing to everyone. Due to my conviction that dissent is fundamental to functioning democracies, I am forced to resign in order to avoid contributing to or profiting from the erosion of protections for dissidents. The United Nations is currently reporting that between 200,000 and 1 million Uyghurs have been disappeared on human rights. Information about political representatives is blocked. Information about student protest is blocked. And that's one small part of it. Perhaps a deeper concern is the surveillance side of this. When I raised the issue with my managers, with my colleagues, There was a lot of concern, but everyone just said, I don't know anything. And then when there was a meeting, finally, there was essentially no addressing the serious concerns associated with it. So then I filed my formal resignation, not just to my manager, but I actually distributed it company-wide, and that's the letter that I was reading from. Personally, I haven't slept well. I've had pretty horrific headaches. Wake up in the middle of the night just sweating. With that said, what I've found since speaking out is just how positive the global response to this has been. Engineers should demand to know what the uses of their technical contributions are and to have a seat at the table in those ethical decisions. Most citizens don't really understand what it means to be in a very large-scale prescriptive technology, where someone has already pre-divided the work and all you know about is your little piece, and almost certainly you don't understand how it fits in. So I think it's worth drawing the analogy to physicists' work on the atomic bomb. In fact, that's actually the community I came out of. I wasn't a nuclear scientist by any means, but I was an applied mathematician. And my PhD program was largely funded to train people to work in weapons labs. One could certainly argue that there is an existential threat, and whoever is leading an AI will lead militarily.
AI enables a new level of concentration of power. And like we've seen in China, this is extremely efficient. And I do, as they have grown up behind their computer screens. And we know that AI amplifies the values and desires of those who control it. And today, this technology is controlled by a very small, powerful elite. AI is often hailed to enforce efficiency in our societies. And today, AI is being used in systems that decide who gets what job, what kind of school, who gets into. It's also used to decide who gets insurance, and maybe more started to use artificial intelligence before we have solved the problems with black boxes and dirty data sets and implemented in our lives. Incredibly fast, and it is predicted that in a year or so,
artificial intelligence evolves at a very crazy pace. You know, it's like progressing so fast. Intelligence agencies. The way we create these photoreal mappings, usually the way it works is that we need two subjects, a source and a target, and I can do a face replacement. This can be very dangerous. You know, if it gets into the wrong hands, it can get out of control very quickly.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. Moving.
I just want to say that I'm not against artificial intelligence. I do see the potential of this technology, and I am also excited to maybe have an AI assistant that is in control of a small group of people. And these people are usually white, young, very, very rich, accountability, and hardly any international regulations. We are also seeing how this tech giants are collaborating with the military industry and intelligence agencies. That we demand transparency, and that we also demand to have a voice in how this technology is used for what. We have to take back our narrative about who we are and what kind of, and in order for this to be created, we need to take back control of our own voices. And in this digital future, we need to wake up and realize what kind of matrix it is that we are a part of, so that we can create our own networks, global community that we are. If you haven't seen I, Human yet, I hope you get a chance to watch it at the Human Rights Film Festival that starts in Berlin next week. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thanks to Tonje and Schei. I'm introducing now Anna Ramskogler-Witt, Artistic Director of the Human Rights Berlin Festival, starting next week.
Being on a panel of Disruption Lab already in August on whistleblowing, and now I sit here and talk on artificial intelligence. To say, as a disclaimer up front, I'm originally, and when I saw Tonje's film November last year at ITFA, at its world premiere, I had like a holy shit moment, to quote Tonje. I was like, many more storytellers like Tonje or like Liam, because it's not something that's far away in the future, like a science fiction, but it's just, they offer some kind of vision through storytelling. And I found also some really interesting documenting about how far advanced these things are. There are like funny Facebook storytelling are just really critical for us. Also like 4 pages of thoughts on the issue. I bet. But ideas they had about megacities, if I would look on the architecture side, Tonje's film and other films as much in the public as possible, because there is just not enough, not just like science fiction where aliens come to our Earth, but like more realistic science fiction, giving us a really understanding of this huge black hole of information that's really
in other concerns, and I absolutely agree with her. But also we can underline what Tonje said right now, that artificial intelligence is a tool. So it can be used for good, it can be, evolution is going at a faster pace at times than our cultural capacity to understand it. So the main goal here is to keep investigating what keeps us human in future cities, where online surveillance and facial recognition technology and all these innovations we've been talking about take place. Now comes my film director. So Liam, you are using design fiction as a powerful tool to spark a debate about future cities, so-called future cities. But
hi, yeah, it's a great question, and I think as we've discussed, and I guess that's why we work in the spaces of science fiction and film to try and introduce these ideas and present them in ways, through stories, that people can start to develop emotional relationships with them, so that we can become, I guess, more critical consumers and more active in taking part in the debates around the technologies that are going to be shaping our lives. And we use the mechanisms of science fiction to disseminate these ideas to audiences outside of conferences like this one. Like, I think it's great to have this event, and it's extraordinary and necessary and urgent. I guess we work through the mediums of science fiction so that people that don't normally show up at Disruption Lab events can be a part of that discourse. We can make a music video and it gets 8 million views on YouTube, and maybe someone's just there for the music. At the same time, hopefully, like a Trojan horse embedded in the mediums of popular culture, we can actually seed some of these ideas about what's happening to our world. And I guess the reason we do that is because I describe these technologies as sort of before culture technologies. By that I mean that they're emerging and they're being implemented faster than our ideological capacity to understand what they might mean. So in these cities that you describe, what is happening is that these technologies are being rolled out without the necessary debate and discourse that would normally be required. Because what's happening is a usurping of power, that we are outsourcing the sorts of systems that normally would be within the domain of a publicly elected government. We are outsourcing them to the cloud, to proprietary algorithms. So we can start to ask the question, as I did in my presentation, are we customers or citizens of our cities? And that shift in power, again, kind of happened in plain sight, without the necessary discourse and debate that we need. So what is required is like really a seismic shift in how we start to implement these technologies, and a shift in like essentially how technology is developed, because we need to start thinking about these systems as forms of public infrastructure. So when these new cities are laid out, we need to understand AI governance and the same algorithms in the same way we understand the water grid or the power network, because the access to these systems affects our experience of cities just as much as large-scale forms of public infrastructure that we know and understand as public utility do.
Thank you very much, Liam. Tonje, and Schei, I have 2 questions for you, 2 questions in a row. Is it everything okay? Tonje? Okay, perfect. First question. Your documentary contains several views about the political implications in terms of power shifts in a data-driven society. The question is, are large tech corporations fully occupying the political space?
Hi. Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I love the work that you do at Disruption Lab, and I wish I was there. I was part of Disruption Lab at Drone, several years ago, and I still have such great memories from the wonderful audience that you have. So, thank you. I do think your work is extremely important, especially in the times we're living in right now. So, as Liam said, and as I also touched on in my presentation, already we are up against extremely powerful tech corporations. They are the most powerful companies on the planet today. And if you look at, also their political power, for example, Google spends, almost the most money on lobby work in DC. They affect antitrust laws and privacy laws, or working against privacy laws. But for me, almost more importantly, I think it's for us to be aware of how the tech companies pretty much control everything as far as our information, where we get information, and sort of concentration of power. If you look in history, it's never been a good thing. And it's so important for us to learn from history, because it is those in charge of the power structures that also are the ones to tell history. So that's why I think it's important to, have taken the role of storytellers of our own lives, so that we can, be part of who we are and what kind of world we want to live in.
My second question is about human rights. A fast technological evolution tends to erase the old scenarios where we fought hard to achieve basic human rights. So how could we stop those rights from being outdated and erased as well?
We are having some tech difficulties, of course. I can just hear a massive echo and I can't hear your question. Do you hear a massive echo or do you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay.
We will
Okay,
repeat
perfect.
the question.
Sorry?
Maybe you could just repeat the question then?
Yes, it was about human rights. We fought hard to achieve human rights in scenarios that are being deleted by a fast technological progress. So how could we stop those rights from being erased and outdated as technology progresses?
Maybe, Elena, maybe you can type in the question in the chat. I hear that it's about human rights and how we protect human rights.
Okay.
Well, one thing that is crucial that we do right now is that we get transparency about how AI is being implemented. Because right now we do not know exactly how AI is being used in our lives. And we know that because we haven't solved the issue of bias with the AI applications, we cannot be sure how we are amplifying further discrimination in our society, and therefore, creating a more unequal world. So that is a huge part of it. Yes, sorry, yes. So I think, one of the issues is that everybody's been so excited about this technology and the efficiency of this technology. And in some way, this, AI has just sort of crept into our lives without us realizing, the implications and consequences of this. So all of a sudden, we are surrounded by AI systems that we don't have control over. So transparency, so that we can have some accountability and decide what this technology should be used for and what it should not be used for.
Thank you very much, Tonje. Let's back to Liam. Can I see Liam? Okay. So, Liam, once you said that an architect's skills are completely wasted on only design and building, and this opened up a completely new vision in architecture. My question is, how will architecture become in future cities? And what role will be played by artificial intelligence? I'm also thinking of the next generation of drones powered by
at least traditional forms of architectural practice involve the making and shaping of buildings as physical objects, right? Like crafting of piles of bricks and concrete and steel and timber in boxes that keep the rain off and condition the air. But what we need to do is understand that a building both has a physical footprint, a city has a physical site, the difference between the physical and the virtual, or the digital and the real part of the profession. Because build of were once squares and physical zones of cities are now forums like Facebook that aren't moderated by a lot of non-human agents. And we need to understand them in the same way that we understand pigeons, nesting in the eaves of our buildings. Body, the way that we see and understand space, are now being rewritten because we're now having to redesign our cities for the metrics of a driverless car and how driverless cars see. So just a simple thing like a street, the material systems of that streetscape need to change because they now need to acknowledge a totally different system of understanding space the street corner becomes fundamentally different. Buildings become designed to be written by all of these new desire lines, the desire lines of technology.
Doesn't seem to work.
And I have specifically a question for Tonje. And I have two questions for you, because I think the first one you probably can be, what are they doing? Would be really interesting global response. So did he...
Governments he's actually working for. But with what's going on in the political space today, you kind of wonder, learning.
And the Chinese case, was it? We pay for that. If I may, I would like to shortly ask, in the meanwhile, Anna, how...
Organizations working on it, but it's not in the core of what you would understand of human rights work. And the second thing, discussion even more, because honestly, those guys frighten me to hell. It's like history has shown and proven that
in the time of AI that we have problems with pretty basic things. So with the question as far as if Google is implicit with the Chinese oppression of the Uyghurs, they are not complicit.
Yeah, thank you. No, my question was more meant to be about the point that she made before that, that was that the Chinese state was using AI, was the first kind of...
So who you are on social media, where you shop, where you go to school or where you work, who your friends are, what your friends like and do, and the same with your family. And all of these activities give you a score. It's also important to realize that this credit system is also connected to a widespread facial recognition program. So, for example, if you walk on a red light, you lose points in your total score. Now, what is frightening with this scoring system is that if you score high, you have a pretty easy life. You get pretty fast internet. You get a really good connection. You get good score on dating sites. And also, to me, what is frightening is that they also then limit where you can travel. So it's extremely efficient as far as countering disability.
It was already happening somewhere, specifically in China. But let's get back to you. Does anybody else want to talk to them?
Oh, what a wonderful question. So here in Norway, we have a school program. So far, the film has been shown to probably around 30,000 Norwegian teenagers. And just to start talking about, all the different apps we use and how we share all kinds of information with our apps. And just to see kind of, how they draw connections, but also how they are also using, their digital platforms, maybe in more creative ways. And I feel like we've started to see now, especially under COVID, where we are all just more dependent on, our social platforms, and that there's some new creativity coming out, especially from the young people. But it is, it's so important to teach critical thinking, especially around this new algorithmic world order that we are living in school systems. So for me, that has been very, very rewarding.
Other questions?
AI, artificial intelligence, becoming more intelligent than people. And I find that a problematic framing. I think the notion of artificial faster than people, but obviously they're not more intelligent than people. What would that look like, and when do you expect that to happen?
So first of all, these are not my words. Why I chose to tackle it in the film is that Google, for example, and OpenAI under Elon text generator that writes text faster than prepare for it, by making sure that the AI that we create today is made ethically, and that we enforce regulations, internationals taking responsibility to make sure that this happens.
Okay, yeah.
Or system. This actually talking about is just really dumb. That really is the critical.
All right, that should be a video today. So as we already experienced, not all our speakers, unfortunately, could be with us here today. As Alexandre is joining us via video, and also Fieke Jansen, who was originally supposed to moderate the panel, unfortunately. And this is with a special focus also on the term digital sovereignty, which Elisabeth, I really liked how you described it in one of the abstracts as getting in the driver's seat of our digital futures. So yeah, Elisabeth will be our first speaker in the panel, and she's an associate researcher at the Weizenbaum Digital City Alliance Berlin, and there she advocates for broadening the public conversation on digital transformation and fostering digital policy towards public good. So we will start with the talk of Elisabeth and then moving on to the other panelists. So the floor is yours.
To a very specific context of Berlin and some things that are happening here, especially about participation in digital policy making and how it's being, as Lieke mentioned, from the network that I'm part of, which is a civil society and academic network trying to influence digital policy making here in Berlin. I'm going to start, however, with my past work because it influences a lot why great, thank you. So before, my academic research very much focused on civic participation and urban development. So digital politics or technology in general wasn't something that I was very engaged with at that time. So in 2016, Mazi means together in Greek, and the idea with the project was that we're experimenting with local digital networks or community networking, or also called DIY digital networks, together with communities that are usually not engaged with technology or specifically not engaged in technology development. And the Mazi project was stretched over several cities in Europe, but here in Berlin we were working together with the University of the Arts and working with communities that were closely connected to common grounds. So we were working with city activist groups in these kinds of situations. And it wasn't easy to bring something like so abstract like technology into spaces that are usually managing very concrete issues like who is getting displaced from their communities, or which local little stores have to close down because the city is not allowing them to survive, or that the planet is getting hotter and we keep on putting concrete on every piece of open soil. But throughout the project, it became apparent that these issues that we were working with, so these issues about property and ownership of land and real estate, or questions of management, who is deciding what is a livable city and who is included in these systems and who is excluded. But we have a really long history and a lot of practice within urban movements to protest for tenant rights or inclusive housing policy, or creating spaces in local communities where we can engage with these issues. But when it comes to technology, we're still pretty much at the beginning, also as what we heard in the talks beforehand. We're still waking up and becoming aware of how technology is changing our social fabric, that the logic behind technology production today is foremost based on economic growth and profit, and that while we use digital technologies, our data and our interactions are being commodified, and that we have little to say about any of these issues. So we might feel comfortable and we might understand when we speak about right to housing or right to the city movement, or we understand slogans like die Häuser, denen drin wohnen, which means the houses for them who live in them. But how do we engage in the same way when it comes to digital transformation? On the one hand, we need to develop critical awareness of the role of technology in our lives. But on the other hand, on an individual level, we have very little leverage when it comes to changing any of it. We could see this, for example, when the GDPR was introduced, so the General Data Protection Regulation, that even when we had this law in our, that was backing us up, the actual task of protecting our data was left to us as individuals. So when we have to accept cookies or try to articulate as a society, as a collective, we need government to take on these tasks with us. So after the Mazi project, I had the possibility to keep on researching in this field together with a research group that has been mentioned at the Weizenbaum Institute, and I'm currently looking at digital politics in Berlin and how it's being made and structured, and of course my focus here as well lies on civic participation. So the question is, under what premises and in what spaces is civic participation in digital policy being configured, and how is the Berlin government cities? Now it's a picture. So digital sovereignty has long been focused on the territorial sovereignties of states. We're seeing this, for example, in the US discussions on TikTok and Huawei, where in these cases the United States is claiming its protection of its territorial and state sovereignty and the sovereignty of its people toward another state, in this case, China. Europe is also holding on to this concept, seeing that none or hardly any larger technology companies or platforms come from Europe. The EU is using funding programs to kickstart European alternatives or looking at how they can build regulation to inhibit breaches in their sovereignty. And as you hear, there is like a nationalistic undertone in this way that digital sovereignty has been conceived. I'm not going to get into that narrative very much, but I think it should be mentioned because I think it's also very interesting. But when we're talking about this kind of digital sovereignty, we are talking about geopolitical ownership of relevant and critical infrastructure. So who is owning the cables, for example, which our information is moving on, or who develops and owns the software and platforms which we use and which shape all things digital. And of course, the big mighty question of who claims ownership of the data and decides how it's used. And these things to the table. So on the one hand, it asks the question of democratic deliberation. So how much are we the people? I really like this quote. He was speaking about the technological transformation of the 19th and 20th century, and for him it was the capacity of society to position themselves in relation to societal transformation that was crucial to attain any possibility of acting as a sovereign people. It's black again. To get back to my question, when you see it like this. So this is an organizational complicated picture, but if we put all parts of government into here, it would be pretty much unreadable. But when we see this picture, it lets us understand that one, government is really complicated. And two, we need policy coherence, because otherwise all of these little also needs to be embedded austerity and cutbacks. So the Berlin administration has not been able to spend any money. The Senate for internalized. And then we, because I'm definitely not there in my objectives and planning, integrate any idea how to drive them. Or it can look like this, which is protests against how platforms like Airbnb are directly affecting neighborhoods and rental prices. 12 to 2014 to at least search for tax evaders. This is, of course, a really civic participation for a different, demanding a digital strategy, fostering sovereignty, sustainability, and policy for the public good. Our main demand was and is the democratization became very rough for digital policy is to find a space, first of all, to find a space where all of these administrations are finally in Berlin, in the internet. But since its beginnings in the mid-1990s, it's like data commoning. I started this conversation on. For the even the word disappropriation, so Berlin shows that it can be very progressive, and this is what we need also, digital policy making. Thank you.
Dedicated to the development of ideas and also a platform to address global challenges. He studied geography and space, addressing issues of mobility and habitability especially. And then also very interesting to mention that he is currently editor-in-chief of Metapolis, which is a newly launched online journal which is proposing.
And I think it automatically named like that has done, because going directly into the topic to pose. And this has a basis to dialogue and to propose bad news for you, because it means that can produce the space where we live. That's why we are here now. We can use a microphone to this discussion and to explanations that can make a little bit clear. 2 days ago with the movie, the scientists themselves, because what we are doing, we have such amount, and as I am myself. So, but since I realized that, and the notion of inclusion, because it accepts scale. So then you can define if this system is resilient or not. Is already pretty clear. Smart is actually what this is enough. And you can manage. I can put everything into, go into this separation. When we something that could imagine what was going to something called the rules for of humanity, and the deaths that we had just by preventing the shipwreck, or the and this is the same with cars. This is the same with ICTs, and we, I think, have to work to try to understand what happens as consequences, and this is, I think, our goal, like to show people and to clarify what are the consequences of some behaviors or of certain usages of technologies that the system of, let us say, our neoliberal world is not really very interested to show. And just to finalize, I think to succeed in that, 0 minutes, and I'm finished, we need to learn how to develop a new regime of discourse, how to generate a new narrative that can break with the old narrative of human beings dominating nature, because the consequence, or the first or the second step of this narrative, human beings dominating nature, is that technology dominates human beings. And if we are not capable to take out human beings out of this jail of humanity and mixing them with nature and mixing them with technology, we might end up with the same mistake of domination and of limitations. And I think that was why I wanted to provoke that humanity is already in the center, and humanity is already in the center because we are still...
Thank you very much, Rafael, for your contribution and also for the few provocations. And I think it's quite a nice bridge to Alexandre's contribution, because I think he might also make a start to address this new narrative that we need, that you were mentioning. He received his PhD in philosophy from the Panthéon-Sorbonne University in Paris, and his thesis was dedicated to the philosophy of the web. And recently he also co-edited an issue of Multitudes, which was entitled, "Is it too late for collapse?" So, Alexandre, I'm very interested to hear your final part of this panel.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm sorry I couldn't be here with you. We have a few problems in some regions of France where I come from. Thanks to the Disruption Network Lab for the invitation and for making it possible for me to nevertheless be here with you. I really wanted to come, which is the main research, computer research center in France. This is a kind of French MIT. And while I was working at INRIA, I did ask at some point some colleagues there why they were working on smart cities. And interestingly, no one could answer that question. No one was able to say why, as researchers, they were dedicating time to that topic. Because of course, such programs are not, proposed by researchers, but by big companies. I've heard about IBM. We could mention Cisco, and of course now lots and lots of other companies as well. So the thing with smart city is smart cities are supposed to solve a lot of issues. There is Severide's law in the 70s that says the chief source of problems is solutions, meaning that with smart cities, you somehow aim to solve a problem like making urban areas more resilient, solve the environmental crisis, and blah, blah, blah. But in fact, by aggravating it, solving current issues through technology and data management, whereas maybe these issues were caused by technology and data management, among other things, of course. And to do that, and that's my third, sorry, I think it's the third slide. Yes, thank you. You have to solve a few issues, like the Jevons paradox and the rebound effect, the problem of optimization, meaning that when you optimize, and smart city is all about optimizing, you end up using more energy, more everything. And that's a problem we have since the Industrial Revolution. It wasn't solved, and we have the same problem at the moment in France with controversy over 5G, because it's supposed to help us fight against the rebound effect, but it is believed that it will in fact fall for the rebound effect. There is the issue of decoupling growth and environmental impact, having greener technologies, but we now know that decoupling is really hard, even if it is possible, and a lot of scientific literatures tells us it's not it's not possible, it's not gonna happen. There will be no decoupling. There is also the problem of the so-called dematerialization. Maybe we will decouple with greener technologies because using ICT and smart city, we will somehow dematerialize some of our infrastructure. But again, researchers have been working on that. You won't see the references, but I will send my entire slides. And their conclusion is that dematerialization hasn't happened and will not happen in the future. It's like Blockbusters was all about brick and mortar stores. Now there is Netflix instead, but Netflix is 15% of internet energy, traffic and energy. So that is absolutely huge. It's a displacement of materiality. There is no dematerialization. And then there is, of course, the issue with the continuous growth of the environmental impact of digital technologies, which, of course, is a problem. It's gonna be stronger and stronger in the future. So, yeah. I want to show, and that's the next slide, an excerpt of a movie. I don't know if you've seen it. It's Network by Cine Lamet, an idea by Paddy Chayefsky. Maybe we can see the excerpt of this little film, and I will be able to comment on it after that. Maybe you can start at 1 minute and 40 seconds, if it's possible.
I don't think we have the film here, unfortunately, do we? No. So
oh, okay. So that's not a problem. I will comment on it. No problem. I will comment on it. So, Yes, sure, sure. So it's an excerpt when you hear Betty talking to the main protagonist of the movie, and he explains him that the world is no longer a world of nations. It's no longer a world of people. It's no longer of human beings, but it's a world of interconnected cybernetic systems. It's not using the word cybernetic, but this is really what it is describing. And what is really interesting is when you look at this excerpt dating from the 70s and compare it to the discourse over a smart city. Maybe you can show the next slide so that I can comment on that. The next slide is about, it's a talk by former IBM CEO on a smarter planet, if I remember well. And the thing is, in the movie extract I wanted to show, the Ned Betty character is talking about corporate cosmology. And this corporate cosmology basically is a cosmology of systems. It's a cybernetic cosmology. And now that we have all this discourse and more than that about smart city is supposed to be revolutionizing our way of looking at things. But my take is it's not revolutionary at all. It's really business as usual. When you compare two discourses, they're really similar. Of course, the movie extract wasn't an exact description of what was happening at the time, it was also projection. But I mean, the cybernetic elements in both of these discourses, and that are so prevalent when we are describing the smart city, means that we're dealing with a tradition, which is a post-World War II tradition, which is changing a bit. There are more digital elements. Some of the technologies are changing, but the cosmology has basically remained the same. And I think it's appropriate to call that cosmology corporate cosmology. So instead of looking at smart cities as being revolutionizing everything, even being innovative, I'd say they are business as usual, and they somehow, for that reason, belong to the past. And this is something I would talk about for the remaining of my presentation. Yeah, there was a nice paper entitled by Orit Halpern, Robert Mitchell, and Bernard Geoghegan, the smartness mandate. And they say advocates of smartness see opportunities to decentralize agency and intelligence by distributing. Oh.
I think we should have gone to the next slide maybe already. Yes, there we go.
Yeah. And so they say, smartness has opportunities to decentralize agency and intelligence by distributing it among objects, networks, and life forms. And this is this very idea of how there is this cosmology, corporate cosmology, that is going everywhere. That's something important. So with smart cities, we can say that this cosmology, this corporate cosmology, extends to cities themselves. They become firms, they have competitors, and they rely on the same infrastructures as corporations do, which is a huge transformation of what city used to be really. Why solutions won't work here? Because the problem with digital technologies, which smart city is a part of, is not an accidental but an essential problem. There is the rebound paradox that won't go away, and the fact that physicists in France called José Roy calls digital technologies zombie technologies, and they essentially are zombie technologies, something I will explain in a moment. And the fact that decoupling is nigh on impossible, meaning that we already know that smart cities won't solve the problems they are supposed to solve, because those problems cannot be solved by technological, even infrastructural solutions. About zombie technologies, I can say just a few words. So this physicist explains that zombie technologies are basically technologies that are not based on renewables. There are technologies for which technological objects become obsolete in no time. And that, on the other hand, produce, how should I say, junk that stays for a very long time, that somehow stays alive. So whence the idea that these are zombie technologies, they do not know how to die. They produce new geological strata and things like that. And we have to deal with them for a very, very long time because they are not well immersed in biogeochemical cycles and processes. So why solutions won't work? Environmental issues are not merely a byproduct, but an integral part of the model. They're not negative externality, but a necessity. Yet with smart cities and techno fixes in general, they fit well within the model of global governance of climate issues. More and more parties are taking up climate issues like cities, like corporations, at their level without tackling fundamental issues of growth, the extraction and use of fossil fuel and the likes. And why is that? Because something that a German politicist, Stefan Eckhout, who's been working in France for quite some time, in his last book published this year entitled The Climatization of the World, he explains that the model of global governance regarding climate issues is based on so-called end-of-pipe measures that we try to regulate outputs and therefore greenhouse gas emissions. But international negotiations will therefore mainly concern the distribution of the global effort to reduce emission. On the other hand, we will not tackle the question of inputs in the processes that determine the evolution of emissions, such as energy production, industrial development models, or the functioning of the world innovation. And among these innovations, you can count smart cities. But as I said, for various reasons, that will not do. Intrinsically, and also because it's a way of not tackling the real issues at hand. I would say the problem also against technophobic trends, they insisted on the importance of technology, just as Stigler did for his entire life. But technology is different from technologies. One can oppose zombie technologies, including smart cities, and yet refuse to embrace a technophobic position. That's why technodiversity is in advance. That's why it's so disruptive. But this time we may say it's not in advance, but rather out of sync with the current situation. We probably do not have the means for these technologies, for these infrastructures in a time of the Anthropocene. So we might think of these technologies back, thus a good example of what I call obsolete futures. Futures which are obsolete as soon as they become extant. Innovations that are 40 years old, and now that they are arriving, we already know that they are entirely obsolete and will not problems of our times. Maybe they could solve, I doubt so, but problems that we had 40 years ago, but there is of resistance and tactics deployed to shut down some project like Quayside in Toronto, which was in the summer. From a strategic perspective now, not just tactical perspective, no effort is dedicated to synchronizing the scenario of the smart city with what we know about the trajectory of the Earth system in the Anthropocene. This is where I develop my notion of the negative commons. The negative commons is a concept I propose to somehow understand the transformation of the commons in polluted soils, nuclear plants, obsolete technologies and obsolete futures, that kind of thing. How we can inherit them democratically and what we do about them. Do we have to live with them? Do we have to dismantle them? And how we do that democratically and by the people. That's the topic of negative commons. And I would say smart city being something basically all about, I think it's the slide before, but anyway, it's the Closing World Initiative, which is an initiative about how we may both inherit existing infrastructures and how we can learn what we can do with them, how we can, and at the same time make innovations not happen. As I said, obsolete innovations not happen, because most of the innovations we have right now and we will have in the foreseeable future is unfit for the time to come. And we're currently helping a city of more than 100,000 inhabitants to foreclose some of its infrastructures with democratic protocols of renunciations that call for broader transformations. Extreme heat, sometimes deadly heat, problems of access to water, and regarding the issues that cities in the future 2050 will face. So extreme heat, problems of, as I said, flood and the likes. So are we sure that the developments we're projecting on smart city are compatible with those developments which are much more scientific? That's a question. Meanwhile, in France, in Grenoble, once a place where smart city was first implemented, Grenoble is looking to ban 5G with a host of other cities in France. So there is a collective movement to question the need to have these so-called programs somehow. I'd say that as jokes, they should be ridiculed. As dystopias, they should be seriously fought. As projects, we should use them to learn how to shut down innovations. And as realities, we should learn how to inherit them as ruins. They are ruins of the past. They are not the future. Thank you very much.
I wanted to ask you, Elisabeth, in light of your work on the Digital Cities Alliance and the Berlin Digital Strategy, if you could...
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We had the Alliance, actually, we met up sometime in April, May. Two administrations realized that they do lack something if they don't have computers. And they do lack something if they're all children being sent home to do some kind of online homeschooling, and just not realizing that we do live in an unequal society where not everybody has educations it means, and how they have to deal with that, and not just say, oh wow, we take this chance and digitalize everything, because that's not solving the problem, because the problem comes before. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And then for Rafael, I wanted to ask you now, as a sociologist, as you said, do you maybe see any things that we also can learn from the history of cities that we could use to shape the cities of the future, sort of take with us from the past, not to end in a too negative note?
The leading and hegemonic in our culture, which is sometimes even to produce problems, to produce waste, because these will mean power concentration, it will mean consumption, it will mean, so the idea, the notion of the city itself, I think it's pretty fine. I think the goal that we all have is how to fix the patterns, the values that actually are designing our behavior, and technology has a lot to do with that, with any doubt. So if we think of optimizing a space, is pretty fine. We want also to produce good quality of sociability. This is very important, and the problem that the future and the present is already putting as a challenge is energy. And this is pretty sure that our current model will not solve this, and we have...
We accelerate certain developments or make people more aware of certain aspects. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's actually, I think what was interesting during that crisis is that it showed somehow the limits of this corporate cosmology I've been talking about, meaning that if you attach the subsistence of people to corporations and everything stops, well, for some people, because there were a lot of people for whom nothing did stop. They were continuously working, taking risk and the likes. But for a lot of people, they couldn't work anymore, and it was their subsistence that was at risk. So we have this system where if infrastructure is put to a halt, if the international commerce is put to a halt, there are a lot of people who are going to die. And at the same time, we're attached to these infrastructures that I just said, and the coronavirus crisis made that very obvious for those who would doubt it. But at the same time, these infrastructures, these models are also killing us in the middle and long run. So we have this perspective that we are attached to, immediately attached to infrastructures, models, and the likes for our subsistence. But in the longer run, this subsistence is put at risk by these same infrastructures, technologies, and all. So this is why it's a very paradoxical situation and very difficult one to address, but still that's the situation we're in, and the coronavirus crisis made this apparent.
All right, then we still have some time left also for questions from the audience. So I see already two, one there.
Yeah, thanks for all of the talks. Alexander, your language really resonated with me, and it made me wonder if we can use language to think in terms of our resistance, forms of resistance, like thinking in terms of the extinction of greedy motherfuckers, the extinction of corporate culture, the extinction of exploitation, capitalism. And in doing that, I think, I tried to point this out yesterday, that I think it's really good to think in terms of making our neighborhoods and our communities incompatible with the dead smart cities. So with Elizabeth's sort of approach to organizing the Kiez in Berlin, we've had some success with that and how we resist the corporate culture. And I think we can inspire ourselves to think about how we can continue in that mode, because the smart cities are actually being made to contain resistance. I think it's one of the biggest agendas of the surveillance state and the smart, interconnected, overwatching kind of culture. So if any of you can reflect on some things we can move on to protect ourselves from these horrible corporate plans.
Yeah, maybe I could say just something. Yes, regarding language, I feel you're right, and we are actually dealing with this as working with an artist who unfortunately died during the summer, but we are trying to how should I say, to hear language, and for example, we talk about this innovation, shutting things down, and expressions that people do not have. Our business model basically inside the Closing World Initiative is to ask corporations to give us money to shut them down, which might seem funny, but this is really what we're doing, and with some success. Because I think that now there are opportunities to weave new alliances with people who might not be militants, who might not have a political culture, but that increasingly, because of the scientific alerts, because of the IPCC, because of lots of signs that people can grasp, there is somehow, what should I say, turning up against, for example, the corporations where they work. Lots of engineers right now, especially in France with the collapse movement, which is really strong, are against some technologies. Lots of CEOs are bosses during the day, and people who believe in collapse during the night interviewed some of those. So there are new political lines which are not the ones that were dividing people in the past. And we should, try to capacity. So those are interesting signs and call for, as I said, new alliances.
If there's another question, otherwise I could comment as well. I think this is also, especially when you're working with very local politics, as you are in the municipal level, it becomes very interesting because you get access to the politicians and the administrators in these departments, and we have had a lot of conversations with people in these three administrations now for the last couple of weeks, trying to talk about this roundtable, for example. And there it becomes a big daunting task to talk about these issues, or to even start putting up that language, because they are people that are not there yet. They are people that are like trying not to work digitally at all, that are trying, like the level of understanding of the issues in mainstream culture, and of course also in these administrations, is not there yet. And I think this is when we talk about what kind of competence do we need to build up now, for example in Berlin in these administrations, it could be technical competence, sure, but I think it's another kind of competence that we need to build up. And I think this is also where we can come in as civil society actors to say, these issues are not technical issues. Like, for example, during this digital strategy process, all administrations were sent a questionnaire on Excel, by the way, and everybody sent it, or not everybody, but a lot of administrations just sent it to the IT guy. So what does the Berlin digital strategy mean? Let's ask the IT guy, maybe he knows. So this is the level where we're standing at right now, and we should see it as also the perfect moment, because then we're all pretty much in the same room. We are all getting aware at the same time. And I think this is really important right now.
I think there was another question there in the middle.
Hi, thank you all for your talks. There was something that Alexandre said about like differentiating between good and bad technology. In many activist circles, I've meet a lot of friends and comrades and who say, you know, oh, technology, burn it down, we hate it. And I sometimes agree, but I'm also a technologist. So maybe if each of you could say like just one thing you would maybe identify as a good and a bad technology for a better future.
Technologies and living technologies, so as zombie technologies are built on non-renewable resources, living technologies will be built on renewable resources, which is not necessary, but a good thing, will last for quite a long time and will not become zombie waste, meaning waste that cannot disappear, that cannot die. Just like ICT cannot die because we're using ore, we're using metal, we're using a lot of things that are not part of any cycle, biochemical cycle. So living technologies, for example, will be the technologies not like black boxes, but being able to interact with it. So all these aspects are better than those that we mainly have right now.
Yeah, Udo, maybe join that. I mean, as I said right in the beginning, I built urban gardens for 10 years. So this is a type of technology building or reconnecting to technology, talk with people over the phone, with FaceTime. This is pretty cool. But I think these are the criteria that are, like, as fast as you put that in the light of climate crisis and climate catastrophe, then all of that becomes irrelevant because it's just nice to have. But of course it's great that we can communicate.
So creating the passenger, you are also creating the pedestrian that already existed, but not into this framework. I think for us, I feel good when the liability that we can have on institutions mainly, because since the level of complexity is increasing.
Great. Hi. I would like to comment on the experience with people in the government in Berlin. I was in the beginning of the year on an event also on smart cities that have influence on our city, and ask if there is a connection or if they are in conversation with Google, and she said no, there is no conversation about that. And when I imagine myself asking the Senate to plant flowers in front of my home, it takes 4 permissions and a half year to get this going, and it seems that the government just reacts on the changes of digital platforms and products, and they are not they're just reacting on it, and it seems they have a strong authority on physical layer of the city, but they have
yeah, that's pretty much the problem, no? I think this is about, it's also about like a cultural shift and of making government understand that whether or not they understand what's going on, they have to stand in our corner and protect us as a society. This is their job. So they have to get up to par right now to have these discussions, and also start being, like they're being pretty provocative, for example. The same way they have to start thinking about the digital. And this was an example with the Airbnb thing, or with these scooters, for example, where they're just pretty much lying on their backs and saying like, sure, they can come. It's like innovation. We have to be open for this, especially because Berlin is trying to profile itself as a smart city, as a startup city. I mean, there's a lot of venture capital here and so many startups, so I mean they're doing a lot of work to put on that image as well. But I think smart city strategy, right? It's in the mayor's office. It's supposed to be a smart city for sustainable, resilient city planning. Where is city planning in this? Like the administration of the city planning should be part of this conversation, same as the Senate for environment has to be sitting at this table. Otherwise, we are making policy that is not related to these two objectives. So I think this is
your presentation, and I have to tell you also the public was really clapping a lot. So I mean, we will meet in the future, but the future is already here with you on TV, so. But I had actually one question for Elizabeth and one question for Rafael, and I think actually my point is to take the provocation of inclusive cities and inclusion, because since you also work a lot on the topic of habitability, I wonder how you could consider the future of the cities related to habitability without inclusion. So I still believe that this concept is important, and perhaps you want to comment on that. And then instead with Elizabeth, I have kind of concrete question, because you were saying that the plan of the cities of Berlin, a smart city, started in 2015, if I understood. So I would like to understand a bit better why in 2015, what was the plan?
The program is great. I think I had just to do that little provocation, because the inclusion in this sense, on the idea of a smart city, inclusion has to occur, because you need to include everyone as a consumer, and that happens. And this is either because you pay something, or because you are giving your data. So we can take an Uber here, we can order a food, and the professional, the guy working there, he will receive his money for his job, but partially for the job, because actually he is data mining, his data mining, and for this part of the job he's receiving nothing. But he has been included. So yes, it was only the provocation, because we are not being included as citizens, no? And that's I think the discussion. But then we also have to move the discussion from a smart city into something else, because the idea of a smart city is that one, is to include you,
I wanted to know about habitability.
And the habitability is also within this idea of a smart city is the economy of attention. So if you are not moving the way you have to inhabit it, a place, it has to be related to any kind of consumption. It is your attention that's been consumed, or it is the way you are paying for a place to live or a place to stay. We had the case of Airbnbs happening, people being actually pushed out of the cities, and it is always to relate to this logics of the financial market. What they do nowadays is not only to sell things and to buy things. They are actually selling things that do not belong to them, or they are selling things that do not even exist. And within these logics, everything falls in. Mobility, the way we have to expect that autonomous cars will be our future. But then while you are moving, you're at the same time inhabiting a place, which is the car, and they might be showing you some kind of publicity, trying to sell something, or just collecting your data to understand the patterns of mobility. And so this is a kind of the coin with two sides. So you have mobility, but you always have any kind of you have to inhabit it, the space. So if we are talking about smart city, within the framework of a smart city, it will be always trying to transform yourself or your behavior, your present, your past, or your future into any kind of a product. It will be commercialized anyway to you.
Yeah, and to your question to smart city strategy, yeah, it was written 2015. I have not looked into that strategy process so closely as the other, as the digital strategy process. But when you read the document, it feels like it was something that Berlin had to do to not pass, to not miss the bus and not have a smart city strategy. But when you read it, it's actually just a collection of very eclectic different projects that could be called smart. Because they have sensors in them, and then saying that this is the smart city strategy. But there was no implementation plan, there was no operative plan, there were no indicators to say what is good, what is bad. So I think everybody agrees also within the administrations that it was not a well-made strategy. And now with these 17.5 million euros, they want to renew the strategy, and they're saying that they want it to be very participatory and so on and so forth. And we will see how this process goes, I think. They will, we were speaking yesterday with Staatssekretär Negle. I don't know what this title is in English, but at the mayor's office.
Secretary of State?
Yeah, Secretary of State of Berlin's mayor's office, who is the person leading this smart city endeavor, and he's very upfront with that Berlin is very far behind on very key issues. For example, he was saying that that when we are speaking about data governance and these issues, we have a lot of work to do, but he's very open towards this to become a participatory process, that this has to do about this is a city planning issue and not a technological issue. So he was saying a lot of the right things, and I think now we have the possibility to take him for his word on this and make sure that this process is something that we can live with. And I think the language problem is big. I think it's a difficulty to call something a smart city strategy just because you have to call it that if that's not what you want to do. Like, we're doing smart city strategy, but we're not meaning all of these bad things, we're meaning the good things, then let's call it something else, probably. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I think we're about at the end of the time for today, but I would also still like to mention, so the smart city strategy of Berlin may not be too great, but tomorrow we will actually do a workshop together with you to create our own kind of citizen manifesto for what we want, the type of city in the future, type of data city we want to live in. So That will be also very interesting to do tomorrow, but first, thanks a lot for the panel of today and for this great closing of our Data City conference. So one more applause for you all. And then, yeah, we'll call you off stage, and then Alexander, and then Tatjana can join me for the final closing of our event. Bye, Alexander.
So we won't be too long because I think now is late, but as the tradition we usually have, we want to conclude the conference stream with some announcements for the next activities and also the day of tomorrow. Come a bit closer, otherwise we are always not in the...
a cable yes. that I don't know if long enough, but I think will work.
Yes. And so we will announce what happens next and then also what happens in November. And we will finish with the thanks to all the people that worked here. So I pass it to you to describe what happens tomorrow.
Yeah, so like I already briefly said, there will be some workshops happening tomorrow. So tomorrow is actually the closing day of the Data Cities event, which is the day focused on the community. So it comes out of our activation community program. And on this day, we will focus on getting hands-on with the topic and also learning from some of the people that have been speaking at the event in a more workshop format. And we will open the day with an artist talk by Simon Weckert on his Google Maps hacks project. And also for this talk, even if you're not joining the workshops later, we still have some free spots. So feel free to come by tomorrow from 2:30 we will start. And then we will continue in the afternoon with 4 workshops. Smash your filter bubble with tracking exposed, visualizing control on critical mapping with River Honor, who spoke also yesterday at the conference, a workshop on reuse, recycling and repair with Philippe Fonseca, and finally the workshop with Elisabeth on shaping the manifesto for the future data city. And then at the end we will come back to share our experiences and outcomes from all of these 4 workshops.
Then I just wanted to announce what is happening next. Of course, now it's very difficult to speak about the future of events, even if we are speaking about the cities of the future, but we don't know what will happen in 2 months. We are planning our next conference the last weekend of November, so let's see what will happen in our pandemic situation. But so far, we are planning it here again. Then we have to understand who could join and how many people we can invite. But this will be our hybrid concept of development. And this conference is called Borders of Fear and is about migration, security and control. So we wanted from the Disruption Network Lab point of view to analyze the discourse of migration, but also of security connected with the closure of borders. And from one side, there is the aspect of closure of frontiers, also creation of refugee camps and escalation of security. At the other side, there is also a strategy of cultural closure that is related to right-wing propaganda and the idea of increasing surveillance and nationalism related to migration. So this is not an easy topic. We never really went into it so directly at the Disruption Network Lab, but we really think is the time to speak about and understand this topic as well. So the dates will be November 27, 28, and then again we will do the, 27, 28, yes, and the 29, we will do another day of a workshop with Lieke. So the idea is always to then conclude with an event that is related to the communities. But now we want also to conclude with our thanks. And first of all, I want to thank all the speakers that came and Mauro Mondello, that is hopefully still watching us online, that has been curating the conference with me, but is in US trapped there. No, not really trapped, but I mean, he's actually doing great things. He has a world fellowship at Yale, but at the moment, apparently, if you go to US, it's very difficult to go out. So he could not come to the conference that he also worked with. And I want to thank our production team that did a really great work. Elena Velianowska, Nada Baker, and Monty Harmony. And Jonas Franke for the design and visual and all the great animations that you saw in these days, and Steph Lenk for the communication. And before then we go into the other thanks, I would like to call Monty here on stage, even if he would hate it, but now you have to do it, because you are leaving us, and we have something for you.
Thank you very much.
So we want to thank you a lot, because we have been working long together. Now I'm getting tired, I don't speak anymore.
Also today.
Very touched by this moment. No, really, thanks for your work. It was great to work together. Also, we have been working in the past, also sharing a lot of ideas, and for me it was really great to have you at the Disruption Network Club, and also for everybody.
Yes, it was a great.
So thank you,
work.
and keep on doing your important work for building a better society as you do. So great. Thank you. And then we go on thanking the rest of the crew, and maybe you want to do, otherwise I'm just speaking alone.
Definitely. So we want to thank our great video team, which is Gonzalo, Gabriel, and Angel, which have been filming all the talks, which we will then also upload later to our archive on YouTube. And of course, a really big thanks to Rana Vadikari, who is taking care of the streaming from the Boiling Head Media. And he really did a great job this time. It was quite challenging, but he managed very well. So many thanks also to you, Rana. Then we want to thank Riccardo Bernardi, who did the photographs for this event, and also Elisabeth Enke, Francesco Mancori, and Thorsten Utken, who did the support for the technology. And finally, we want to thank Kim Sanu, even though she already left, but she was helping us at the cash desk, and also assistant event management. And then also thanking Jasper and Guillermo, who helped us for the setup and the takedown. So thanks to everyone.
And then thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Tatjana.
And we will meet tomorrow at 2:30 for the continuation.
Yes, hope to see many of you there.
And